Im Bechukosai Teilechu. That's mitzvosai tishmu v'asisem osam. If you go in my chukim, so I mean the Orach Chaim HaKadosh touches what it should say in Bechukosai tasu. What's Teilechu? If you walk, what's the walking? So one explanation is that it says when it comes to leaving that Torah, even when you're traveling, in Bechukosai Teilechu, that even when you're not necessarily sitting in the Beis Medrash learning, Teilechu, also Bechukosai. Where he says that a person has to be so imbued with Torah that quotes a pasuk that it says in Tehillim, Choshavti Darki. What does that mean? So it says David, he was so spiritualized that without even thinking, his feet would draw him to the Beis Medrash. So that's Teilechu. Because he had such a desire and he was so conditioned only to do that, without thinking, he went in that direction. That's Teilechu. Pirush halichose mi'atzma ti achreo k'maimer David rovacheshin kvar regilus. It's like a person, every day he drives a certain location. One day he has to go somewhere else. All of a sudden he's going to where he normally goes. Without even thinking, almost it's by rote. That's David. His involvement was nothing existed in his life but Torah. So he'd have to think differently not to do what he normally does. That's how conditioning was only to study Torah, David HaMelech. There's a story that right at the time when World War II broke out, so the Kamenetz Yeshiva, Poland was bombed immediately. But Kamenetz, so there was a question then, there were students in the Yeshiva from various countries. So there's a certain person, he comes to Rav Baruch Be'er. So Reb Reuven Grozovsky, who was Reb Baruch Be'er's son-in-law, who eventually became Rosh Yeshiva and Torah B'das after the war when he came here. So he was like, besides being one of the Rosh Yeshivas, he was the administrator of the yeshiva. Took care of the students. So he goes to him, he says, I want to talk to you about, about my visa and my passport and this and that, because I got a telegram from my parents, they want I should come back. Whether it was to Germany or to somewhere else, wherever it was. So he says, you have to go as Reb Baruch Be'er. You have to go to Rosh Yeshiva. Reb Baruch Be'er just was preparing the shir. And when Reb Baruch Be'er prepared his shir, his level of involvement was that his eyes could be open, he could be looking at you, and if you looked in his eyes, it looked like it was another world. That's where, so this person goes, the war broke out, and he's speaking to Reb Baruch Be'er for an hour, and he realizes, although he's speaking to him, there's no response. His eyes are open, he's looking at him, it's like there's nothing happening. And it took maybe 2 hours till Reb Baruch Be'er finished thinking about it. He was thinking about it, then he was like he was coming out of this trance. You understand? A person's mind is always occupied, and every bit of your emotion is fully invested in Torah. So where are you going? You're only going one place, where you're supposed to be going. You have to somehow extricate yourself from that to think about anything else. Story of Shach, Tzaddik Livrocha. Shach also, he had this ability that when he put his mind, he got involved, think about something, it was like in a different world. Shach wasn't a tall man, and Rav Shach is sitting and learning, and all of a sudden he fell off the chair. He fell, and he was on the floor in the Beis Medrash. So two Bachrim go, and they pick him up, put him on the chair. As they pick him up, he comes to himself. He doesn't realize what's going on. He didn't realize he was on the floor. So Rav Shach, I knew him a little bit, his personality was a very interesting personality, pure as a child. And he says, what are they doing to me? Where are they carrying me? He didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden he realized they're picking him up. What are they doing to him? It's like they're roughing him up or something. What's going on? But that was the level of, so a person to that degree. Is an expression, I've heard it, you don't hear these expressions, but like from going back, people who are even older than him in Slobodka, they said the way, in Yiddish there's an expression, the way a drunk is attracted to wine, that's the way these people are attracted to Torah. And that was the degree of attachment to it. Okay? That's a Bechukosai Teilechu. So you understand. So what do you need to merit the ultimate bounty? Bechukosai Teilechu. If you're at that level, that it's Teilechu, that it almost goes automatic pilot, that's the degree of involvement, then we talk about the Nosati Gishmech and Bitam. Because otherwise there's you and me. Nosati Gishmech and Bitam, it's interesting. It says Nosati Gishmechem. I will give your reign in its time. Nosati Gisham and Bitam. What's Gishmechem? Gishmechem, your reign will be in its time. And if it wouldn't say you earned it? What would you know less than Nosati? Rain will come in its time. I understand. But it's implicit. But that's implicit. I will give the rain in its time. What's the Gishmechem? No, I understand that. And if I say, if you do that, I will give, the rain will come in its time. Isn't that implicit that it's coming because of you? Okay? So I was thinking, the Gishmechem is, if it would say, Nosati Gishom and Bitam, right? The rain will come at its time. So the rain's coming. You may have, it's in your merit, the rain is coming. What happens if a person's field needs watering? And I take my water and water his field. So why are his crops growing? Because my water watered the field. I mean, the bracha will be directly, it's not only attributed, you creating the bracha. It's not, in your merit the rain will come. So who's bringing the rain? Hashem's bringing the rain. No, the rain Hashem's bringing is your rain. It's like your water is watering the field. You understand? I'll give you an example. There was a story. Shulbeib Diskin, he was in Paris for a year before he came to Yerushalayim in 1863. He had to flee from Brisk. So this is after he was released. Whole story. So he was in Paris for a year, and there was a certain family who lived in those days they called it, what was it called? In India. Today they're called Mumbai. It used to be called, what? Bombay. Came from Bombay. He was a Jew. And very wealthy Jew in those years, the Jews who lived in India, the 1800s, they were like, they were Mirages. They had wealth which is not to be understood. And then they started, the Haskalah movement tried to infiltrate Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was known as the holy city. That people coming with beards, and they were teaching Jewish studies bareheaded. They wanted to bring, the reform movement wanted to infiltrate, and they were very opposed. They didn't know how to handle it. Okay? They didn't know how to do anything. They didn't know how to stop it. Finally, the father of these young men, he was in France. He was he had some kind of illness, stomach illness, and he was in Switzerland to see the professors. He had some intestinal issue, and so he walked into the shul. He didn't know who the Morel Disco was. He asked him for a bracha, and he saw he was a very holy man. And he gave him a bracha. He should be well. Okay. Next year he comes to Yerushalayim. This person, this Jew from India, his children weren't at his level. He was like from the old time, Sephardim, Iraqi. And his children, they felt it's a new age, you have to introduce a new type of education, and they have an unlimited amount of money. They're supporting this new school system. Okay? So he immediately he knows the name, he recognized the name. It's their father. So he writes this father a letter. He says, I gave you a bracha in Paris that you should be able to live despite your stomach issue, and you should recover. But you realize your sons do this, your life is going to be lived very shortly. It's shortly going to be over. So he wrote him. And if in the merit of that, you'll have a full recovery if they don't do the school system. So the father gets the letter, and he understands it's from a holy rabbi. He calls his sons. He says, you want me to live or you want me to die? They don't know what he's talking about. Do you realize you're killing me? So they say, what is it? They say, no school system. Whatever the rabbi says. Finally comes to Yerushalayim to visit the Morel Disco in Yerushalayim, and there was a Jew in Yerushalayim. He was a Hungarian Jew, not from Munkach. And in Yerushalayim there was no livelihood, so when he left Hungary, he figured it would be a pharmacist. So how do you become a pharmacist in those days? You read a book for a few weeks, and that's how you became a pharmacist. He took some powder, put it together, mixed it, and that's when you make sure to have the book. So his name was Goldschmidt. This person's name was Goldschmidt. Okay, so he comes to the rabbi, and his illness is not good. So he says to him, he says, go to Goldschmidt, and Goldschmidt will make some kind of remedy for you, and you recover. You take his remedy. He goes to Goldschmidt. He says, take some honey, take some eggs, and take some milk, boiled milk, mix it together. You drink it every morning. A week, your problem, you'll be healed. He looks at the man. He was by the greatest professors in Switzerland. He's telling him this kind of nonsense. He used to call this the goggle muggle. That's what they called it. So he says, so he goes back to Real Diskin. He says, look, what are you talking about? This is what he tells me. He says, they told me this. I've been doing it for years. It doesn't help. He says, but there's a difference. If Dr. Goldschmidt says to do it, it works. Somebody else says the same thing. It's a different goggle muggle. It's a whole different thing. If it's gishmeichem, then v'nosna oretz yivula. When two people water the same land, when does bracha come out of the land? If it's gishmeichem. It's somebody else's water, somebody else's rain. It may water the same piece of land. It's not. There's no bracha coming out of that rain. It's all because it's gishmeichem. Okay, let's see tomorrow.